Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. The UK has been in an electoral bind. They've been constantly looking for the politician that will lead them out of the left-wing madness that has consumed their country. But despite offers from different right-wing figures, even people starting new parties like Nigel Farage, they've seen failure after failure. But finally, a new champion has emerged. The right wing in the UK seems very excited about the rise of Rupert Lowe, but many people in the United States haven't heard of him. Kind of came out of nowhere to them. They don't know what's going on. So I wanted to have somebody on to discuss this important moment in UK politics. Joining me to discuss it is one of our favorite Lotus Eaters, Harry. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you very much for having me on, Auron. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. And guys, we are pre-recorded today. I am traveling, so we can't answer your questions, unfortunately, at the end. Just wanted to let you know that. Appreciate the support, but we can't go through super chats today. So, Harry, a lot of people are suddenly seeing excitement about Rupert Lowe starting a new party. They're pretty confused because for them, Nigel Farage is like the new right-wing guy. We just got a new right-wing party. We get that maybe the Conservatives in the UK aren't sufficiently right-wing, but wasn't Nigel Farage the answer? Don't we like Nigel Farage? What happened here?
Well, Nigel Farage has always been a bit of a charlatan, and we at Lotus Eaters have been a bit hot and cold with Nigel Farage for a very long time. And it's also other parts of the Reform Party, such as Richard Tice, who's kind of the right-hand man of the party. We had Dan and Bo of the Lotus Eaters were both separately standing as potential MPs for Reform back about 2 years ago, and various circumstances with both of them led for both of them to be delisted as candidates and kicked out of the party. Bo, for instance, was the most shocking one, which is that Reform as a party have put themselves up kind of implicitly, at the very least, even if not explicitly. Implicitly, they are the protest party, they're the anti-immigration party, which does suggest mass migration. Right, and at the time that Bo was in the party, they had a mass migration policy, or it was part of their manifesto that they were going to promise to do mass deportations. So Bo wrote up an article, I think it was for the Mallard magazine in Britain, saying, okay, here's how it would work then. If we want mass deportations, here's how it would work. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be pretty. And this will be a theme that we come back to in a moment. It will be difficult and there will be hardships. The Guardian will run newspaper headlines and the BBC will show footage of crying women being taken from their homes. But it's necessary if we want to save our country from the multicultural fate that we're experiencing right now. Too much for Reform. So for having the absolute gall to explicitly lay out the implications of their own policy, he got kicked out of the party. Similarly with Dan, I forget the exact details, but something was said, I think, on his Twitter account that was beyond the pale for Reform. So they kicked him out of the party and stopped him from standing as a candidate. So we have our own direct personal history with Reform in that way. So I just want to be clear with that before I say anything else. But yeah, Nigel Farage is weak. There are a number of examples over the past few years of him being interviewed and giving public statements where he explicitly says that mass deportations, things that are necessary to save England and Britain more broadly from a demographic crisis, are not on the table. Now, he gives various excuses for this, various reasons. The most notorious one is from last year, I believe, when he was speaking with GB News America, and the wonderful chap who does the interviews for them, his name has suddenly just escaped my mind. Let me know if you remember, where he was on that, and he was asked, are you going to do? He was just asked straight up, are you going to do mass deportations? Are you going to do what needs to be done? And he just went, it's impossible. It's impossible. And then when he was on the Winston Marshall show, he was asked about Muslims in the country and what he would do about them. Rupert Lowe, for those who are unaware of who he is, as the head of the Restore Party, just last week got done fronting and coordinating what was called the Rape Gang Inquiry. And of course, that mainly involved Pakistani Muslims, the grooming gang crisis, the scandal and controversy that happened in this country over the course of decades. He was asked, are you going to do anything about these people, about these communities? Are we going to see a removal of these communities? And he said, oh, it's impossible. I can't do anything like that. And we can't do anything that's going to alienate potential Muslim voters in the future. So in a number of ways, the party more broadly, but Nigel Farage himself has been shown to be weak and not having the strength of character or even the vision to do what's necessary for this country. I don't even necessarily think personally that they want to do it, that Nigel Farage wants to do it. I think on a very obvious level, he's kind of a 1980s liberal Thatcherite. So he does see some things to do with greater diversity in the country as being automatically good. So there's just a number of issues with him straight off.
Yeah, I mean, from the outset of that party, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm certainly not as up on UK politics as you, but from the beginning of that party, while, as you said, it was kind of set up as the nationalist party, it was set up as, the party that was going to try to stop immigration, these kind of things, it immediately filled its leadership ranks with a number of Muslim and Indian immigrants. Now, there isn't inherently a problem necessarily with someone having a position that's going to further your cause joining the ranks, but it seemed like most of the people they were adding were moderating or completely reversing any interest that the UK right had in taking serious action on the immigration issue. So it wasn't just that he's been mealy-mouthed and unwilling to commit to important steps, or you could say maybe there's just a political, realistic understanding of what can get done. He's actually filling the party with people who would actively working against the agenda that most people who wanted to support the party were ultimately supporting.
Yeah, I mean, most notoriously, there was Zia Yusuf, who is a Muslim man who became chairman of the party, who I believe bought his way into that position by putting a £300,000 donation into them. So he immediately bought his way into the party, and there are lots of concerns, understandably, about a Muslim man being so heavily involved in the top decision making of that party. And because of the controversy, he was asked to step back, or he chose to step back from that role as chairman last year, but has already come back into the spotlight just today as we're recording this, because he was announced at a reform conference as being part of Reform's shadow cabinet. For those who are unaware, the American viewers right now, in the UK, as part of the parliamentary system, we have the government and we have the opposition. The government has a cabinet which has the ministerial roles, like for instance, foreign minister, head of the Home Office, secretary, Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is basically the person in control of the economy. And we have the opposition, who have their own shadow cabinet, which is just the people that they will put into those positions if they are in government.
Yeah, when you tell an American that you have a shadow cabinet, they assume there's some kind of Illuminati, QAnon thing happening. There's not a similar concept reflected in the United States.
I mean, maybe, but this is all quite out in the open.
So Rupert Lowe has a personal history with Nigel Farage as well. And I don't know if this video is recent or if it just started circulating again today. But they had a video of Nigel Farage on stage with several other speakers, and he's being questioned. And he says, yeah, basically we threw Rupert Lowe out of the party because he said we would need to deport Muslims, and that's just too far for us. We just can't be in that situation. Was that, a recent recording? Was that one that was pulled out from a while ago?
No, that was today. That was
Amazing.
That was part of the Reform conference that was going on, where they were making all of these announcements with the shadow cabinet. A journalist got up and asked the question that everybody was thinking, which is, Rupert Lowe has just announced that Restore Britain, his think tank movement that he organized last year, has become a party. They seem to be a direct rival to you. What do you have to say on this? And Nigel Farage got up and he answered the question. And at first he said, actually, Rupert Lowe's really litigious. He sues everybody. He sued me back in 2019 when he was involved in Southampton. He sued people back in the day, so you can't trust him that way. Besides, there are like 11 other centre-right upstart parties that are coming to take my crown, so it doesn't really matter. And he could have just left it at that. He could have just left it at that, but he had to add in the moral condemnation as well, which is, as you said, he then said, referring back to when Rupert Lowe was in the party and was kicked out of the party, that his stance on mass deportations was, I believe the words that he used were beyond the pale and beyond the realm of decency and morality. So Rupert Lowe, at the time when he was still in reform, so again, for everybody who doesn't know, Rupert Lowe kind of emerged on the political scene in a major way around the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. Before then, he had been a candidate standing for things like Nigel Farage's prior Brexit party, and he had also been known just more generally on the public stage as heavily involved in the Southampton Football Club, of all things. But it was really late 2024, early 2025, when he was putting out all of these large posts on Twitter about the things that he was doing. He was going through in his capacity as an MP for Reform at the time. He was speaking to all of the different ministers in government, trying to speak to all of the different positions and departments of government, and ask the Home Office, for instance, what was being done about grooming gangs, what had been done in regards to a grooming gang inquiry. Can we get some records on what was said to the public at the time? Can you get any sort of action taken for these things that are of paramount public importance for how the country has been run and will be run in the future? And he started to get a little bit of a momentum off the back of it. And he was very unapologetic that how he saw Reform's mission was as a protest party that, if they were to enter government, would need to, as the name suggests, reform the systems, reform the government from within, and also, in the process of doing so, enact mass deportations. They needed to take this foreign population, especially that had been brought into the country, especially under Boris Johnson's Conservative government, the Boris wave, and they needed to be taken out of the country. They needed to be sent back to where they came from. There needed to be huge reforms on the ECHR and a number of other systems within this country that ensure that these people come in. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Zia Yusuf and the rest of the Reform Party allege that Rupert Lowe has been accused of bullying his own staff members within his office, and that he had tried to start a fight with Zia Yusuf. And for that reason, he had been, I believe, at first suspended and later kicked from the party, pending an investigation into it that also came with police charges. So they had levied police charges against him for trying to assault the then chairman, Zia Yusuf. Now, these charges eventually got dropped, but obviously it led to a lot of a lot of harassment in Rupert's personal life. Rupert's also a farmer, and interesting fact for the Americans out there: you are allowed to own guns in England, but most of the guns in England are owned by farmers. Rupert Lowe owns a lot of guns, and they confiscated all of his guns as part of this, which led to a wonderful little moment when the whole criminal charges were dropped, when he got all of his guns back, and there was a wonderful picture of him carrying all of his guns in a wheelbarrow back into his farm. It was, I'm sure, bring a tear to all of your eyes right now. I can see it warms your heart hearing a story.
Honorary like American, walking through there,
Yeah, it was beautiful. But this is kind of contrary to everything that Nigel Farage said just today. Because at the time, the story that the public was sold, that what we were told was that Rupert Lowe was a bully, and he was violent, and he was arrogant, and he was trying to assault his colleagues. And that's why he had to be removed from the party. What we heard today from Nigel Farage himself was that it was actually a moral condemnation regarding his views on extreme mass deportations that led to the party removing him. He said, because I knew that it was morally reprehensible, we had to kick Rupert Lowe out of the party. So, I mean, that's, if nothing else, it goes to show not only the weakness of their stance on such things, but also the dishonesty of the way that they treated Rupert Lowe in that whole affair and tried to weaponize the criminal system against him.
Well, in a lot of ways, it also signals the level of danger that they feel with a guy like Lowe around. Like, it's very clear that he threatens their right flank rather significantly. If you can tell only by the fact that Nigel Farage basically assassinated his own political career live on stage today. So there's that. It feels in a way like Farage is almost a William F. Buckleyite figure in that he's there to present himself as the new way to oppose the left, the new way to fight back, the guy who's making waves. But his primary concern is actually gatekeeping, keeping things well within the fenced understanding, keeping people on the reservation, while putting himself out there as a reformer, as someone who's going to make any kind of changes, and thereby controlling, the narrative that is allowed to enter into British politics. I've had the pleasure of going to your country here a few times in the last few years. And the thing I've been struck by in most political situations where I've been introduced is that everyone under 35, I'd say, in the UK is radically to the right of the leadership of even like what is supposed to be their right-wing parties. Like there's a huge disconnect in America between the GOP and the actual voter, but the gulf is just not the same when it comes to the understanding that there's at least a decent amount of the GOP that and their voters that overlap in the mainstream. For the UK, it seems very much not the case. So I can understand why they feel the need to have this level of containment. Now, in the United States, obviously, we have a two-party problem. You can't just start a new party in the US the same way you can in Britain. The dynamics with our voting system just make it prohibitive. You basically have to go and like skin suit the GOP. You can't just zero seats them the way you guys did to the Conservatives and go somewhere else. But can you talk a little bit about that dynamic in the UK? A lot of people are trying to push the idea that Rupert Lowe is splitting the vote and guaranteeing left-wing victory. Is that a valid concern in your electoral system, or do you think there really is a future for his movement?
Well, there's a few things that I need to address there. First of all, in terms of the split in public opinion versus elite opinion in this country, there was a poll done quite recently that showed the elite opinion within the political parties, every single one of them, going from Labour and the Greens, which you would expect, to the Tories and Reform, were all well to the left of the average man on the street. So there is statistical evidence of everything that you've said there, and also just on anecdotal evidence. I could go into any pub in the country. I can guarantee you this: any pub in the country, and strike up a conversation with anyone, and the 90% chance would be that they are going to, by the end of a conversation, be espousing views well to the right of any mainstream party in the UK. So that's just a fact that, yes, this country is not represented at all in its views and opinions by the elites. And this is something that Farage is trying his best to kind of sidestep with a lot recently. And you've seen it a lot with some of the public messaging that's come out from regime dissident media, you could say, something that wants to look dissident that is also still regime at the same time. So some of the people who on Talk TV, for instance, like Alex Phillips, coming out and saying that, oh, well, this is just all to do with online, this is an online phantom. Essentially, that all of his engagement is fake. It's all bots or people who are in this online echo chamber that doesn't translate out into the real world. And you get a number of other reform shills saying the same thing. But the fact of the matter is that they are trying to ignore that most of those people who are engaging will be real. And it does reflect what most normal people think. I know people, I mean, you and I were both into heavy metal. I know loads of heavy metal people, which for a long time has been a subculture that's been appropriated by left-wing attitudes and left-wing talking points. A lot of people that I know who exist within the kind of alternative culture, I can have a conversation with them, and within about 5 minutes, they'll be on my side on most things, because what we believe is simply common sense. It's inevitable that it is all common sense. And so they want to try and dismiss this as all an online phenomenon when it does reflect the views of this country and clearly is something that they are going to have to worry about. But and returning to the thing about the electoral system, the fact that you can start a party, that is something that you can do. And that was the initial appeal of reform is that they started as this protest vote. They could siphon votes away from the Conservatives, which they definitely did in the 2024 election. It was part of the whole zero seats campaign, which is we don't want people voting for the Tories. If you want to vote for a vaguely right-wing aligned party, then you can vote for reform instead. But the problem is that since then, we don't necessarily just have a two-party system, but we do still have a uniparty in a similar way to America, in that there are functionaries, that we have Whitehall, which is the houses that house all of the buildings that house all of the departments that the government has, which in a similar way to America will have a kind of permanent bureaucracy in it. That permanent bureaucracy is largely Blairite, so they'll carry on that kind of ideology that Blair put in there, which has to be definitely contended by any government that comes in and wants to reform. But also the ministers themselves can switch parties. And we've seen this recently with a number of huge defections from the Tory party to reform. So some of the most obvious ones, you've had people like Suella Braverman, who was part of the Tory government, defected over to reform. We had Nadhim Zahawi, who was part of Boris Johnson's government, defected over to reform. You have had Nadine Dorries, another Boris Johnson alumni, defects over to reform. Most notoriously now, we have had Robert Jenrick jump ship over to reform after saying all through last year that he wasn't going to do it, and kind of having a mini public feud with Nigel Farage at the same time, where they were throwing insults at one another. The problem with this is that they are basically, and as well, of course, there's the talks that they would be willing to form a patriotic alliance at the next election to keep Labour out of government in 2029. But that just means that you're just recreating the Tory party, because you've already taken in a lot of former ministers from the Boris Johnson and even the Rishi Sunak governments. And the problem with that is as well, you carry over the Tory superstructure with the party, which is all controlled by a man called Michael Gove, who's a very sinister character in himself. If you're familiar, as I hope many of you will be, with Jonathan Bowden, there's a very notorious Jonathan Bowden quote where he'd said that he'd spoken to Michael Gove about the things that were happening in the country and the changes that were happening in mass migration. And Michael Gove said, yes, it's all terrible what's happening in this country. It's awful, isn't it? But we can't do anything about it. It wouldn't be British to do anything about it. So this kind of like structural weakness, this structural inactivity, going with the flow, just letting the ratchet keep on turning is inbuilt with the Tory party. And it just allows, if they do this whole alliance with the two of them for the next election, it just allows that whole Goliath, that Leviathan monster, to reform, just with kind of Nigel Farage at the head of it, which doesn't seem to make that much of a difference. But also, like with Robert Jenrick, for instance, he tried over the past few years to build himself up as the dissident Tory. He was the alternative to the Tory party structures, to the Tory usual. He was going to rebuild the Tory party and make it based. He was going to come out and say all of the harsh truths and say everything that needed to be said about mass migration. He could make change, okay? The problem is that he was the immigration minister under Boris Johnson. He was the guy letting all of these people in. Like there was the whole thing, there was the big controversy last year where after the fall of Afghanistan, a load of Afghans got let into the country without the public knowing on a technicality that only got reported on last year. Back in 2022, they just got let in. None of us knew. None of us were told about it. That happened under Jenrick. And he wrote articles for newspapers saying about why we needed to accept these needy Afghans in, right? And then all of a sudden, he just wanted to rebrand himself as, I'm the dissident anti-immigration Tory. It's just, it's dishonest. It's dishonest on its face. You can't trust these people. And then Nigel Farage is letting these people in like it's some kind of win. The whole system is built and structured in a way that is trying to keep things as they are. Restore does seem to be a break from that because they're not being run by the same sorts of people. They're not letting themselves be infested by these kinds of Tories and be restructure themselves in favor of the Tory superstructure.
Yeah, I think that is a key difference. Obviously in the United States, we have a similar problem in that, whether it be the Tea Party or then the MAGA movement, there are always these attempts to push back against kind of the establishment conservative Republican understanding. And these new congressmen come in or senators come in, political actors come in. They're promising everything, but there's nowhere else for them to go but to plug into the superstructure of the Republican Party, into the GOP and Conservative Inc. And so very quickly we see this co-opting, things shift. Remember, Ted Cruz was a Tea Party conservative. He was one of these guys who was going to come in and shake everything up. And even when you look at the Trump administration, I genuinely think there are, I know for certain personally, there are many people in the Trump administration who are genuinely trying to change what's happening in DC, what's going on. They really do. They are true American nationalists. They do truly want to see America succeed above all. But they are fighting not just the left, but their entire bureaucratic structure and honestly, most of the conservatives and GOP as well, because there's just so much of this baked in. So you have guys like Ben Shapiro, who were never Trump the entire time. And now for the last year, Ben's been letting us know that he gets to decide who's part of the conservative movement. And actually, William F. Buckley was right to gatekeep all those people who ended up being entirely correct about the problems in the United States out of the party, so that we never addressed anything. We see guys like Lindsey Graham become central somehow to the foreign policy of the administration, even though he represents basically everything that Trump voters were moving against when he was elected. And so, the difference here, and I've seen Curtis Yarvin say this. I know a lot of people have soured on Curtis Yarvin, but I think this is just a really good observation by him. His pushback against the Trump administration the entire time is that they have just not been radical enough, that they have just not been committed. He's like, you need, and this is funny coming from a guy who pushes Machiavellian politics all the time, but he says, you just need to come out and be hyper honest. Like, tell people these problems are to the core. It's the whole system. We got to burn the whole thing down and build it back up again. And you need to give me radical power in order to take radical steps. And I'm not going to tell you it's easy, and I'm not going to tell you it's simple, and I'm not going to tell you it's pleasant, but I am going to tell you the truth. And that's what's going to make it worth it. And the difference here seems to be that Rupert Lowe, at least at the outset, anything can change, but the outset, that seems to have been the message. I've heard endlessly that, these young millennials and Gen Z kids, they're so spoiled. They don't want to sacrifice anything. They don't want to do anything. And uniformly, the response I have seen, especially from young British men, has been to say, yes, I am on board with all of this. Rupert Lowe is putting out commercials saying, none of this is going to be easy. None of this is going to be simple. We are going to have to fight like hell, and it's going to hurt. And the response has been, let's do this. Let's go. And I think that, at least that mindset early on, right now, Trump is trying to convince the boomers that they can keep every dollar of value in their house until they're 99.
Oh, I couldn't believe it when I saw that clip, honestly.
But this, the refreshing shift from Rupert Lowe is, no, you're going to sacrifice, and it's going to be worth it, because the problems we're facing are real. We're not going to properly manage your stock portfolio while we fix this problem. We're going to fix the problem. I think that's the level of seriousness that people are looking for.
Yeah, and just to address as well what you were saying about the party superstructures, the interesting difference with British politics is, as discussed, you don't have to, if you already have enough of a reputation and capital behind you, you don't actually have to subsume yourself into a larger structure like the Tory party. Reform just chose to do that. This was a conscious decision that they made to join hands with a lot of the people who were part of these last disastrous governments and keep the door open for an alliance with them in the future, basically spitting in the face of the constituents that they'd gathered over the past few years. But yeah, with Rupert Lowe, it is refreshing. And, I also put this down to the fact that he is surrounded, and this is another important part. Farage surrounds himself with yes men. He surrounds himself with people who are going to stroke his ego and tell him that every decision that he makes is an amazing decision. I just think about this, right? Okay, nobody around Farage had either said or had the power to stop him from carrying on with his disastrous cameos that he does. He is on the Cameo app. You can pay €80 to get Nigel Farage to say anything that you want, right? And Nigel Farage will say anything that you want, okay? There was one that came out just a few weeks ago where, if you've heard of the band, the disgraced band, the Lost Prophets, their lead vocalist, Ian Watkins, is probably the most notorious child abuser in all of British history for the 21st century, right? Nigel Farage got paid on Cameo to say, oh, here's a send out to my good friend Ian Watkins, rooting for you, buddy, right?
Wow.
Like, and nobody around him either told him that's a bad idea or had the power to look at that and say, Nigel, you need to stop. So the people around these people are very important. Rupert's surrounded by a lot of very good, reliable people that I know and have met personally and do trust to be making good decisions and advising him for to go in the right direction. And this initial video that they put out of Rupert on his farm with this kind of, it's very British. There's a grey, overcast sky. It's a man in a plain coat and farm trousers and Wellington boots walking around, and he's saying, listen, guys, it's going to suck, but a lot of people are going to have to go. It's millions are going to have to go. It's going to be grim. It's going to be difficult, and there's going to be suffering. But England, he's essentially saying Britain says that you must do your duty, right? And one, there's the refreshing honesty of that. There's not speaking out of both sides of your mouth like Farage does. There's not this endless history of betrayal and backstabs like Farage has. It's also kind of a call for what young men want, which is a sense of purpose. Because otherwise, what do you have? You have your BS job, you have your little Dino box with a tiny garden, and you have the promise that the country will continually get worse and worse and worse, and then you die. And the politicians at the same time will call you lazy. Again, just going back to Farage, another thing that he did last week was that he hit out against the idea of working from home. He said it's complete nonsense and we don't want all of it. He appealed to like the kind of boomer biases that you get, where they just want to say, oh, all these young'uns are too lazy. They don't want to put in a real hard day's work like I had to back when I was a kid. And he came out saying, under reform, we're going to get rid of working from home. It's nonsense. You need to be working in an office. So again, for the youth vote, what is that? What is that? It's the promise that you're going to have to spend loads of money on a commute, where you're going to have to interact with a load of strangers of foreign extraction who might be dangerous. Just a few months ago in Canterbury, we had a terror attack on a train. So, if you're going on a train or if you're going in the tube in London, flip that coin, buddy. Let's see what your luck is today. And you're going to have to spend loads of money on food. You're not going to get as much time with your family. You probably won't be able to afford a family in the first place. So who even cares, right? That's kind of what Reform are offering young people. And then they're also saying, we kind of won't deport people anyway. Whereas Rupert is offering them a mission. He's offering them a sense of purpose, and he's not sugarcoating it. And that's one of the things, is the aesthetics of it were kind of perfect for Britain. It wasn't, like It seems bizarre to me, but the whole fireworks and pro wrestling aesthetic of American politics works for Americans and for American voters. For me as an Englishman, it seems bizarre. Politics should be dour, grim, serious men in suits talking seriously about serious matters. It shouldn't necessarily be Hulk Hogan coming on stage and ripping the shirt off. It's awesome from an outsider perspective, bizarre as it is. I look at it and I go, that's different. That's not how we do it over here. But Reform have kind of tried to appeal to that same, my hair's going slightly crazier as I go on. That's fine. Reform have tried to appeal to that confetti and fireworks, big American MAGA aesthetic. For me, it is much more appealing and much more homely and sincere to see Rupert Lowe, a farmer on his farm, talking to you about the necessity of what the world demands right now. That works a lot better for me, and everybody I've spoken to about it has said the same thing.
Yeah, in a way, you can feel like adopting the American political aesthetic is its own kind of nod that you're going to stay plugged in to the system, as opposed to bring something specifically British and particularly English to that understanding of kind of what you're doing as a nation. But this comes, I think, to the core of the problem for both of our countries at the moment, which is, of course, immigration and demographic transformation. One of the big things driving the right-wing split in the UK is that despite no matter how many times the British vote to end mass migration and get some level of relief from the people coming in, nothing happens, right? And then this is just a massive problem. This is why Rupert Lowe's announcement that millions must go home is a radical. For people in the United States, proportionally, that's tens of millions have to go home. That's the level of deportations that he is suggesting. And so that really does shift the game, because when you look at the United States and you look at the desire of really both parties to find new constituency groups, they've been very comfortable with moving in, pretty much anyone from anywhere, declaring them real Americans, and just moving forward with it, assuming that that's going to somehow secure them victory. In fact, right now we're having a very interesting discussion that parallels one that's happening in your country. There's been famously a few, I can name several different dust-ups over what is an Englishman? What does it mean to be English? Is the English an ethnicity? Is it the overarching identity of the British Isles? Is it something that's entirely able to be adopted by anyone anywhere, or does it have something to do with distinct heritage? Simultaneously, here in the U.S., we had Jeremy Carl, friend of mine and fantastic patriot, trying to get confirmed for the Trump administration. And because he wrote a book about basically white people being targeted and being discriminated against after the civil rights regime, they have painted him as some kind of rabid ethno-nationalist. And he was famously asked, what is white culture? As if these people don't spend every single day talking about how evil white culture is and how white culture has to be suppressed or gotten rid of. So it's not that they don't know what white culture is. It's not that they don't know that it exists. It's not that they're confused or
wasn't there a display at the Smithsonian breaking down white culture?
Precisely. So this feigned ignorance, this playing the hatchling that the left is doing on this, very much mirrors what we're seeing in Britain on this question, to the point where Britain is simultaneously pretending it doesn't know who the English are, while specifically running government programs to drive the English out of the English countryside. And so it's just interesting that once again, simultaneously, we have this exact discussion occurring across the ocean, mirroring the idea of can we actually define who we are as a people, while the left pretends that they're not basically using their monopoly on this discourse, the extreme taboo of any European descended people recognizing itself as a distinct group, as this way to bludgeon people out of having an honest conversation.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and this is the problem we've seen today following the announcements with Restore. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the people surrounding Reform, a lot of their kind of media mouthpieces have been coming out asking the same question. Alex Phillips, who, shall we say, has a intimate and personal history with Nigel Farage herself, was coming out and asking stupid questions like, "Oh, I just don't understand it. If British is something to do with ancestry, does that mean that my stepsister isn't British?" To which the question becomes then, well, does she have any British ancestry? Are any of her direct ancestors English, Scottish, Welsh, and even, they don't like you saying this, but it's true, even maybe Irish? They don't like you getting lumped in there, but, plenty of you signed up for the Empire, lads. Sorry to break it to you. She's playing the hatchling, and this is after somebody Basil the Great on Twitter put up an amazing post earlier. Back in October, she was posting about the necessity of getting over quote unquote racist genetics, and she's starting to throw out this term when it benefits her politically and, well, she believes it does. It benefits her in terms of the frame games that she plays, but she knows damn well everything that being British means, because she was speaking as recently as October about the necessities of of getting rid of the taboo around the idea of race and genetics. So again, you can go on 23andMe, Ancestry, whatever. You can give a little sample of your DNA, and it will tell you an exact genetic breakdown of your mix. And you don't have to go that far, because anybody who is English or British already knows that they are, and they don't have to keep reaffirming it again and again and again. It is to do with ancestry. It's to do with your heritage and culture, in much the same way that in America you have heritage Americans who can trace their ancestry back to the Mayflower. It's very similar to that, except we go back further. We go back to 1,000 years ago. We go back to the Anglo-Saxon invasions. We go back to, I'm almost entirely pure English, but that still means that I will have a fair Celtic admixture within that. Nobody's pure Anglo-Saxon in this country. So that Celtic admixture will go back potentially tens of thousands of years on these isles. But they just pretend not to understand that. And it's very disheartening when you get the Tories with Rishi Sunak, who is Indian, saying that he is English. You get the Labour putting forward these horrendous policies like you've discussed recently with Operation Scatter, and the idea that they're going to try and breach the rural countryside and the shires with greater diversity, because they worry that otherwise our national landscapes and national landmarks will become irrelevant because a bunch of foreigners who got off the boat yesterday aren't interested in looking at them. So they need to, add vape shops and barber shops to make sure that these people are going to be interested in going to see Stonehenge or some rubbish. And then at the same time, you get Reform coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, I bashed my head against the wall earlier today, and I completely forgot what genetics are, and I forgot what being English is about. I guess being English is just about getting the passport." And Alex Phillips, when it was on Talk TV, was speaking to Charlie Downs, who is, somebody that I know personally. He's a good chap. He's a very honest chap. He was on Talk TV speaking about this, and she was trying to ask him, why does Britishness have to do with ancestry? Why does it have to have anything to do with that? And she was basically trying to get him to say something that she could twist around as being quote unquote racist. So when it suits them, these people in Reform, or at least their media mouthpieces, again, this doesn't apply to all of the members. There are plenty of honest members in Reform, but these media mouthpieces will revert to type. They will go to the same liberal, dishonest frame games to try and paint you as being an evil bigot if it suits them. But again, that's one of the things that is refreshing about Restore, is that their headline media, faces in the media, people like Charlie Downs, are unapologetic, both in saying that Britishness as an identity is to do with your ancestry, Scottish, Welsh, English, Irish, and he also ties it further to our Christian heritage. We've been Christian since about the 6th or 7th century. That's a heritage that goes back over 1,000 years as well. So it's wonderful to hear someone speak in both ancestral terms and broader religious, cultural terms as well, because it speaks to a very certain moral underpinning that you just don't get with these other parties.
Yeah, people pretend like this is so complicated when it's absolutely not. Is it heritage, or is it belief? Is it history, or is it shared tradition? And the answer is yes, of course. Like, the answer is all of those things, and everyone understands this when they look at a family. Is someone who is a child adopted into a family, can they become part of that family? Well, yes, they can. But will it be the same as a child who's naturally born into that family? Certainly not at first, and not for a long time, and maybe not ever. And that's okay. Like, ultimately, you do your best to blend those things together because you've made a choice to adopt that person. But that's the key. You made the choice to bring them in and make them part of it. They weren't forced upon you. If they were, then there's simply no way that you're ever going to blend together as a family. These are obvious. Like, can you have an adopted child that is as valuable to you as a child of your own blood? I think you can get pretty close. I think for some, the answer is yes, but it's obviously harder. It obviously takes a lot of work. You kind of want that child to already be somewhat like your family. Like, these things are all doable, but we understand this concept. It's not radical or foreign or alien to us. We're simply intentionally complicating it because we want to throw that one taboo about understanding, any kind of European identity, like that has to be off limits so that way we can't have the discussion. If we're having the discussion, I think the answers are very obvious and ultimately very reasonable and traditional across the ages.
Yeah, and to build on your analogy about adopting somebody into your own household, one of the other things in that situation as well is when you meet people like this, they also do have a great interest and desire to reconnect with their biological family if they're out there somewhere. There's this whole identity crisis that can arise with such a thing. It's quite tragic in situations where families have been abandoned, where somebody's been abandoned from their biological family. But we see this kind of mirrored in what we're talking about with mass migration as well, which is White Papers Policy Institute. I was speaking with their director, Cyan Quinn, last week in an interview that will go out soon, probably by the time this goes out. And she was citing statistics on these polls that are done amongst different generations of immigrants. And by the time you get to a third generation of immigrant, I think something like radical between 60 and 70% of them want to return to the country that their original family came from. They feel this yearning to return back to their homeland. And that's perfectly natural. That's good. There's nothing prejudicial about that. There's nothing bigoted or hateful about that. That's simply them wanting to return to their natural home. I respect that and I appreciate that. And I do want to help people do that, because the thing that they always say with mass deportations, they don't have to be scary. You can offer people legitimate routes who want to take that opportunity to go back to their homelands to do so. It doesn't need to be people like stormtroopers knocking over people's doors and dragging them out into the streets. It can be much more peaceful with that. And she was citing in America, with Trump, there have been some policies like the voluntary repatriation, where people have accepted monetary funds so that they can return to their original country of origin. And lots of people have taken that up. So it can be a very positive thing for both sides. And I think that Rupert Lowe has also spoken about the possibility of doing such a thing with Restore as well. Because ultimately, there's no benefit to anybody in destroying the British countryside and destroying British pub culture because Muslims in this country don't like to go drinking and don't like that they can go into a pub and see a dog because they're afraid of dogs. That you're making everything worse for everybody by doing that. The natural
we're also getting the you can't have dogs in America because of Muslims argument, which, and God forgive me, please don't make me do this. I had to defend Randy Fine on this issue, which hurt my soul. But he was right on this. Like, we don't need Muslims here to, like, I care far more about having my dog than I do about having a Muslim be comfortable in my country. But hopefully that's the only thing Randy Fine and I will agree on.
Fingers crossed. If you start to agree on a bit more, I'm going to start having some
then
questions.
It's time to start to
mate.
worry. Wellness check there. But there's just nothing beneficial about it, and even if you want to get all like squishy and liberal from a humanitarian perspective, is it not kinder to reunite these people with their homelands that already has a culture that's more accommodating and natural to them in the first place? All right, Harry. Well, I think it is fascinating, the changes that are occurring in your country. I am very excited to see many of my friends in the UK so excited over Rupert Lowe. I know it's been a long slog for you guys, and there's still plenty more work to do. But I am very happy for my friends to have a important symbol to rally behind, and someone who they feel like ultimately is pushing for the good of the country. So before we go, can you let everyone know where they can find your work?
Well, you can find me on lotuseaters.com, both the website and the podcast of the Lotus Eaters YouTube channel. I've got lots of interesting content coming out on there soon. So I have quite a few videos. I have the long-awaited Star Wars prequel defense with AA, which I know from the posts that AA has been putting up has actually caused riots. People have been really clamoring for that one. Carl's been trying to hide it from the people, but the people will get what they want. I've got some more film content coming out where I'm talking about the series of the films of David Lynch. I've got the interview with the White Papers Policy Institute, and very, very soon, perhaps a documentary series related to 1960s American civil rights and their permeation throughout the Western world. related mainly to the gay pride stuff will be coming out very soon. There's not been a official announcement done yet, but look out for March. There will be something very exciting to watch out for then that has been cooking in the oven for a bloody long time. I hope it's worth the wait for you all.
I also have heard rumor that there might be top secret Harry Robinson metal licks floating around somewhere that one day we might hear, but we'll have you back on if that ends up, if the rumors are ultimately proven true, we might have to talk about that here soon. But thank you so much for coming on, man. If anybody is for some reason not watching the Lotus Eaters, trying to keep up with what's going on in the UK, you should most definitely do that and watch Harry. And of course, if it's your first time on this channel, you need to click subscribe on YouTube, the bells and notifications, all that stuff, so you know when we're going live. Sorry, remember this one is pre-taped, so we're not live right now. We can't answer any of what I'm sure are incredibly intelligent questions. If you want to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you do, guys, please leave a rating or a review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.